Let's see what loose women. Listen, this is like prime daytime TV. If you're like at home most of the day, like your husband's the one that works or something, you're doing stuff around the house, looking after the kids, whatever. This is the kind of thing you might. This is the kind of thing you might end up watching. Is loose women. Let's have a look.
This is the big news of the day. Of course, it's across many, if not all, of the front pages. UK Supreme Court judges have unanimously ruled that a woman is defined by biological sex under the Equalities Law.
Can I just say, based?
Now, the judge, Lord Hodge, has stressed that the ruling should not be seen as a triumph of one side over the other, and that the law still gives protection against discrimination to transgender people. Now, I think this has become a very toxic debate, hasn't it? Probably over the last 7 or 8 years. And I think if we're being honest on the panel, we're nervous about talking about it.
Absolutely. Because the debate has been hijacked, and it's very, very hard because we're all...
Loose women is a strange name. Yeah, it sounds a bit... it sounds like they're commenting on the women that are here. I'm sure if you say a bit loose, it means like they sleep around or something like that. But I don't know why it's called that. It's not. Not up to me. Hi, Spencer. Hope you're good. Hi, Simon. It's like the UK version of The View. I believe so.
Especially those of us in the public eye, we're all terrified of cancellation for saying the wrong thing.
Well, and also out of genuine regard for the women who have felt this was very important in terms of protections in places like hospitals, prisons, refuges, sport, etc. But also out of regard of the trans community, who are a small and vulnerable community that nobody wants to see.
I like self-deprecating humour. That makes sense, yeah.
You know, feeling, well, we've all heard of stories, haven't we, of individuals in the community who are scared right now. And I don't think anyone wants to see that, do they? No one.
Where did this...
Well, no one wants to see that, but like you have to consider why people are getting so freaked out. A lot of it is because they're consuming media that is scaremongering about this. They're listening to people that are scaremongering about this. A lot of the TRA side of the debate is massively overblowing what this actually means and essentializing the fuck out of, you know, what is honestly a common sense thing. And instead of like seeing how things happen, how things pan out and letting the dust settle and just trying to go about their lives, we're like freaking out en masse. And it's not good. It's not healthy. But that doesn't mean that we can't make decisions about things like that in case a group freaks out. Like, that doesn't work.
Toxicity start.
I know, it's so interesting because we're talking like, you know, the character of Hayley Cropper in Coronation Street. How long ago was that, Denise?
About 25 years, I would say. I was there, so about 25 years.
Early
20 years ago, Nadia, trans woman.
Hayley Cropper?
Won a Big Brother.
Yeah.
Okay, it must be a trans character in a soap. I don't watch soaps.
Now, for the trans community, of course, they will have always suffered.
Like the Big Brother woman, that was Nadia something, wasn't it? I remember that, actually. That would have been one of my first exposures to, like, a trans person. But in the media, it was always like, oh, it's like men who think they're women or men who want to be women. And that sounded kind of weird to me. Like, I don't know, because I felt, even as a kid, that I'd rather have been born, like, female if I were to get to choose. But that didn't mean that I thought I was like a male that thinks he's a female, you know. I guess I turned into that for a while, but hey. Calling the debate toxic is really lazy. Is that way almost entirely because of TRA behavior? I'm like inclined to agree. I need to think about it more. There is toxicity on both sides. I think one of the problems ultimately, if I'm to try and be a bit more balanced, is that this like, the like battleground has been places like X or Twitter, which they very much encourage like toxicity, and they very much encourage like the removal of any kind of nuance from an issue, because you're talking in like character limits. It's the internet as it is. It's very easy to say all kinds of crazy shit because you're very anonymized. I was a transvestite character in Coronation Street. No one cared then because there was no trans ideology or people kicking up stink over nothing. Yeah, I can buy that. Hi, Kelly. Hope you're good. Hi, Jennifer, also.
For terrible prejudice and discrimination. But
because the thing is, like, they're going to say, oh, this has been around forever and suddenly it's a big deal. We've had a lot of, like, trans visibility. You know what I mean? Since then. We've had all, like, the Pride Month and all this kind of shit. Like, trans visibility is going to be a double-edged sword. You're going to notice trans people more than you used to. there's going to be more people that might be supportive because they might hear about it and think, okay, that kind of makes sense, I guess, I don't mind. And like, on the flip side, the more people are aware of trans, the more people who think it's ridiculous or disgusting or whatever are gonna hear about it by default. So you're kind of increasing acceptance and the opposite at the same time. Hi, Peace Frog. Hi, Bears Against Evil. The gender critical people are not trying to physically attack trans people. I mean, I haven't really seen anything like that. I don't know that there's none that would, but I don't know. It's kind of, they seem to take the debate a lot more personally on the trans side, and I guess I understand that. But there's a lot of them that will take things way too far. You get plenty that their kind of violent tendencies seem very close to the surface, and that's not okay.
What point were people being?
Yeah. What point were people being asked to hate and be so angry? You know,
I mean, 25 years ago, are wonderful.
Well, yeah, back in the day, like, you're probably less likely to notice a trans person back in the day because you don't really know what trans is. You might see a taller, more masculine-looking woman. They're just a different kind of woman, I guess. And then another thing is the attitudes have changed a hell of a lot. Like, it used to be about fitting in. It used to be about passing as best as you can. Nowadays, it's more about identifying and, you know, being entitled to certain things because you identify as something rather than fitting in with other women and making it work that way, which is it's always going to cause problems because identity is nothing, basically. It's not a way to organize society because then everyone is just who they say they are, and that doesn't make sense. That's completely circular.
Friend and wonderful actress Julie Hesmondhalgh, of course, famously played Hayley. Nowadays, a trans actress would be asked to play Hayley. Yeah. But this morning, I spoke to Jake Graff. You may know of Jake and Hannah Graff, a well-known trans couple married to each other. And Hannah is really feeling the pain of this ruling. She is a trans woman who has served in the army, and she feels that she has served her country, and she feels that the country have turned against her. And Jake made a very good analogy when I was trying to think what to say. And he said,
the country have turned against this person because woman means female. You see what I mean? Is that not like an overreaction? Is there not something missing between the UK Supreme Court ruling that woman means female and someone saying my country has turned its back on me? Is there not kind of a part missing there? Where you're adding up 2 and 2 and making 20?
It's like Brexit. No matter what your feelings about Brexit are, he said it gave people almost the right to be racist and say racist things.
I don't know about this, man. Are you saying that something like Brexit shouldn't have happened? I mean, listen, I voted against Brexit. I disagree with it. But are you saying like things like that shouldn't happen because that's going to potentially drive like more hatred? Ultimately, whenever trans issues are in the media, that by itself is going to increase visibility and thus hatred. But the visibility thing has been a project of this trans side. So everything the trans side has been doing has also been increasing visibility, you know what I mean? And that's going to increase hatred by itself. Because it's fresh in people's minds again. And people have very strong opinions on both sides of the aisle of this. So I don't know, I don't give this kind of thing much credence. Like, Brexit coming up increased like hatred towards foreigners. Like, yeah, that's not a good thing. Does that mean that those debates should never happen? Like, what do you do about that? It's a bit like whenever we talk about like dinghies coming across the channel and like illegal immigrants arriving in the UK. Should we never talk about that as an issue because it might bring up anti-immigrant sentiment, might bring up like racist attitudes? Unfortunately, it's just part of it. A lot of vets can't get decent care. This is a betrayal. Yeah, geez, and that person is a vet as well. Fucking hell. Although having said that, like the issue with veterans can be very complicated. You get some people that want to oversimplify it. I'll just stick them all in houses and prioritize them and stuff, and that's all well and good. But some of these people, they've got so many issues. They're so fucked up by what they've been through. It's like sometimes it's very difficult to help them because you get into that kind of state. There's a tough one.
And he said this gives people, especially those who don't really understand usually the trans community, the opportunity to challenge.
Well, people get to say what they think. Like, What are we implying here? That we should never talk about these kind of things? That we shouldn't have, like, rulings on this kind of thing? Like, what are we implying here?
Especially those who don't really understand usually the trans community, the opportunity to challenge.
And I mean, people who don't understand the trans community, well, the trans community is partly at fault for that. How much does the trans community honestly outreach? How many times do we hear these attitudes from the trans community where it's like, it's not my job to educate you, go educate yourself?
And it's made Hannah very fearful. She's a mum of 2 daughters. You know, she's lived.
She's not a mum. Stepmother, maybe. Can you call yourself a mum? I know.
A life very happily as a trans woman with all of the abuse that comes their way anyway. And I completely understand that. And I think it's about definitely.
But like, what do you do with that though? So what's the conclusion? What's the logical like endpoint of that? So what? You just don't talk about that kind of thing? That doesn't make any sense. These things are still issues. These things still need discussing. Like, the fact that this is going to happen regardless. Like, it's just, I don't know what point is being made here. So like what? They shouldn't have made this decision? There's not a good reason to define woman as whoever says they're a woman. Or we have to keep it that way in case it increases transphobia.
Protecting the rights.
A lot of people seem to think you can't ever talk about difficult issues because you'll hurt people's feelings. I think it's an American thing, very Potemkin village tendencies there. But we've been hearing it in the UK for a long time. I mean, how many people, when like the grooming gang stuff was going on, and maybe I was part of this, I don't know, I used to be more like woke than I am now. How many people would be like, well, you can't really talk about that, you might offend Muslims, you know what I mean? Well, you should be able to understand that Muslims are human beings, whilst also acknowledging that there are some of them that have been engaging in like terrible behavior. Unfortunately, we have to have these conversations, and the lack of having these conversations has made it worse.
Of biological women, but also still protecting.
Well, I think we want to represent.
But that's the job we now have to do.
Because I don't quite know, Kay, what this ruling has changed.
Well, this was a legal ruling, wasn't it? It says that when it comes down to under the Equalities Act of 20.
In my humble opinion, there are people in the trans community that make ordinary people hate. People must talk. There can be no real resolution without dialogue. Yeah, I agree. There's little mutual understanding. And I think a lot of normal people, if they actually heard like what some of these people, some of these trans people that are prominent and stuff, are actually saying, they'd realize there's significant problems there. And there has to be some kind of middle ground ultimately. Hope you're good multi-Chad.
10 that a woman will be defined by their biological sex. So take the example that we had in Scotland that I think a lot of people took notice of, where a convicted double rapist called Isla Bryson decided that during the case they were transitioning to be a woman and spent some time within a women's prison. Now, if you are detained within a women's prison and then, comes into the prison an individual who is a double rapist, a convicted double rapist, and has recently transitioned to be a woman, is that an acceptable situation?
It's not, but there are always going to be bad people and bad men.
Well, yeah, but the thing is that...
No one's saying there aren't going to be bad people. Like, what's this point? Okay, so does that mean that maybe there are instances where trans women shouldn't be treated like women?
That's what the law's for. Most of us live our lives in a very law-abiding way. And I would absolutely... it breaks my heart to think of your friend feeling that they're going to be challenged. Most of us go about our lives doing the right thing. The law is there to put in place guardrails.
And your friend feeling that they're going to be challenged. Ultimately, if you break certain norms, such as... Like, what am I saying? If you go against things like gender norms, certain spaces, you might get mistaken for the other sex. That is going to happen sometimes. Whether you're a trans woman or just a male who's kind of feminine, or vice versa for females.
When people start to veer off.
Ryerson didn't have a gender certificate, right? I wouldn't imagine they would have. Like, usually that's not something you can just get as soon as you decide you're trans. And you're supposed to go in front of like a panel of people who decide like whether you meet the requirements. I can't imagine someone like Isla Bryson meeting the requirements. But then, I don't know, I haven't applied for one myself. I looked into it a couple of years ago, but I just don't care to anymore. I don't care what I'm legally known as. I'm still me. I still get to do whatever the fuck I want.
So it's in place to try and make sure the Isla Bryson case does not happen.
Yeah.
It's not there in place for people.
And I mean, this has happened. Like, we can talk about Isla Bryson. What about Karen White, who was put into a female prison and then started assaulting the inmates? You know what I mean? Bryson only claimed to be trans after being charged. Well, the thing is, Isla Bryson kind of breaks like trans logic, because trans logic is that if you come out as trans, you were always trans and you were always actually the other sex. So Isla Bryson was trans when they did the assaults, surely. Or they're going to have to start agreeing with like trans meds and like true trans types of people that some people are genuinely trans and some people are not genuinely trans. But then it's like, well, you can't just say any trans woman I don't like is not actually a trans woman. And the ones I do like are the ones that are actually trans. You know what I mean?
To be challenged, for people to be threatened, for people to be discriminated. And in the equalities law, the trans community do have protections. Having said that, I fully understand why they will be feeling very, very nervous at the moment.
Yeah,
and we have to take the opportunity.
Yeah, and what the trans media should be doing, what more trans people should be fucking doing. And I'm not seeing almost any of them do it. Like, I think someone like Blair was quite good talking about it yesterday when I watched her video. It's like, we need to be reassuring each other. We need to be reassuring each other that we still have rights, that it's not a case of, well, now you can go fuck yourselves. That there's even acknowledgements in the interim guidance that there's going to be times where trans people using the same-sex facilities is not very, what's the word? Realistic. And that there still needs to be provisions for those people. Like, we need to see where the dust settles, but people are just freaking out and taking it to crazy extremes instead. Like throwing out all kinds of like conspiracy theories about how the Supreme Court is trying to suck up to Donald Trump, which why the fuck would they be doing that? Like, I don't know. The trans side needs to acknowledge that they're all driving each other insane. They're all over-radicalizing themselves and each other. And that things aren't working the way they are. There needs to be a lot of change. We need to change the way that we start looking at these kinds of things. Because gender identity doesn't fucking work. You can't impose that on society because you can't even show what a gender identity is. And when people discount someone's gender identity, it's usually out of convenience because it's someone like Isla Bryson who's done something bad and is just saying they're trans for like ill-gotten gains or because they're scared of going to male prison because they're a rapist. But it's like, well, okay then, well, how do you tell a real trans person from a fake trans person? You can't just say that anyone that's done a bad thing therefore cannot have gender dysphoria, therefore cannot have a gender identity different from their sex. I don't know. I don't expect these people to be too well versed in what actually seems to go on in trans circles.
License.
We now
They
have to
fought
take
so
the
hard.
opportunity to listen to people, to try and understand people instead of shouting at people, because that's what we have done for 7 years.
Yeah.
We have shouted one
Where
side
did that
to the other.
start? Which politician? Was there a politician that used this as red meat? And these women actually fought the case.
Well, it's not about a politician using it as red meat. I think immediately pointing at the government at the time or whatever the fuck isn't going to work. Ultimately, all this stuff thrived under the Tories. Ultimately, in the US, Trump was president between 2017 and 2020. The woke shit was like on a fucking massive fucking rise between those years. And ultimately, what we've seen is like the movement trying to push culture way too fucking far, way too fast. And it's pushing back now. And listen, they need to let me on. I'll educate them on this.
Have been through
Well,
hell in lots of ways.
The
haven't they?
For Women Scotland group, I mean, I know there was all this stuff yesterday of them celebrating popping champagne. I mean, I have no direct contact with them. There was a feeling it was sort of, some people are interpreting it as transphobic. You know, they have been on a very hard road. They felt very strongly.
This is like this Scottish lady. Who is this? I don't know who this is. She seems actually quite smart.
Some people are interpreting it as transphobic. You know,
Started with Obama. I think putting it on a politician is really silly, to be honest. It's far more to do with like lobby groups and rights groups and the way that the conversation has like shifted within like trans groups over the years.
So they have been on a very hard road. They felt very strongly about this, protecting women and refugees.
I think you're truly trans if you transition medically. Transgender removed the words we already have to describe those experiences. Yeah, I mean, like, transsexual and transgender now basically mean different things. Ultimately, the reason why it's not entirely fair to make it all about like a medical pathway is that it prices people out depending on where you are. It otherwise means that you're having to wait for a very long time if you're on the NHS, for example, to be able to start. And like the same desire is there. And ultimately, a person could change their like physiology because they want to be more feminine, but still acknowledge that they're a man, still acknowledge they're male. Are they trans? It's kind of, I don't know, it's difficult. But I don't know, non-binary happened. Everyone is just who they say they are now instead of trans being tied to anything real or physical. So it's like, I don't know. Like the trans community has kind of fucked itself on this issue by being full of nonsense. On over-radicalization, it occurs from echo chambers, and we've seen what happens when someone from the outside tries to break it down. Dissenters get excised from within. How do you fix that? I think the only way to fix that is to like leave them to it in a way. Just exclude them from any kind of sensible discussion. Well, like, if you're that crazy, if you're that indoctrinated into something that makes no fucking sense, then I don't know, man. Like, I think the more politically useless we make those kinds of people, the more people will start rethinking. Because they're going to have to start wondering why no one wants to fucking talk to them. And why they're constantly being told not to talk to anyone else. I don't know. I don't know what else to do at this point. It's a bit like a lot of the, like you get people who believe in all the weird trans shit. They believe in like weird far leftist shit that's never going to happen in this country or in America or anywhere like that. I think at a certain point, all you can do is like write people off. I don't like to write people off, but I don't know. Stop giving these people power. Stop listening to them. I think it's about all we can do.
In vulnerable places, etc. And they were vilified a lot of the time in Scotland. You know, Nicola Sturgeon called a lot of them transphobic, which they would absolutely say they weren't. So I would wonder if part of their jubilation yesterday was about, you know, them feeling vindicated.
And yet again,
yes, this is true. Listen, she's right here. Like, there's people like Maya Forstater there who had a contract like cancelled or not renewed for saying that sex is real. Like, some of these people have been like treated like bigots and like fucking pilloried by like woke people in the trans community for thinking that sex is real and immutable. She went through like court case after court case before finally being vindicated. I can see why these people are celebrating. Someone like J.K. Rowling has been shat on to hell and back for over 5 years at this point. Originally just saying that sex is real. You read the original tweets. There really isn't anything that crazy in there. So yeah, I wouldn't be celebrating myself. I don't know if I see it as something to celebrate. But at the same time, I can see why they are. Some of these people have been through a lot.
If part of their jubilation yesterday was about, you know, them feeling vindicated.
and yet again, front pages of the newspapers want to rule by dividing again.
Yeah.
You know,
The
and
media wants
this
to
is
divide.
about having a better conversation.
But we don't want to buy into that.
recognising.
Front page headlines want to rule by dividing.
Who are you on, Brenda?
I think, I remember when myself and Denise were on the panel with Monroe, which was very enlightening for me. And, you know...
Oh, Monroe Bergdorf is crazy. She seems like she's kind of embodies all that like SJW shit that has infected like trans circles. That has ultimately caused a lot of problems. Because a lot of these belief systems are just kind of crazy, unfortunately.
She spoke about the discrimination that was faced in the workplace, the discrimination with getting the correct right healthcare, any healthcare and homelessness. And I think that this debate has the possibility of pulling focus away from what the actual real issues are.
Like homelessness, I would be willing to bet that however it's been presented, it's very complicated. You're going to get shitty families that throw out their kids because they're trans. That happens and that sucks. You also get other kids. They get into this trans stuff. They get completely indoctrinated. Or their parents aren't willing to affirm their trans identity, which is ultimately up to them. And like, what ends up happening, like these divides form in these families because of this like change in ideology, because these kids get radicalized. And it sucks. Sometimes you have to kind of look at it and think, well, you get some parents that they probably don't know what else to do with their kid. Like, you look at someone like that Birdie person, I 100% believe that, like, their parents tried their best with them and they only ended up out on their ass because they wouldn't do anything to help themselves. Like, homelessness is always extremely complicated conversation. And listen, I haven't seen Munro Bergdorf talk about this, so I don't know, but generally the way it gets framed is not entirely, it doesn't cover the whole range of issues.
That the transgender community.
I mean, how many of these people, how many of these SJWs are ever talking about how disproportionately it is that men are the ones ending up on the streets, you know? Never seem to have a huge amount to say about that.
Are facing, it's very easy for everybody to be all talking and up in arms and then just sweep what the actual real issues are under the carpet and they never get resolved. That's what I'm a bit nervous of.
Well, I mean,
the actual real issues get misrepresented on both sides, right?
Really does nothing to change the fact that it will be illegal to discriminate against trans people based on
the fact that they're trans.
I
think it's just important.
But what it does is it opens it up to, because
comfortable.
again, I was trying to ask the questions this morning saying, so if our trans community is still protected, what does this actually change? I guess what it changes.
Don't let your kids have unfettered access to the internet. Yeah, I'd agree with that, yeah.
Say, for example, at the NHS, if our trans women friends were admitted to hospital, previously they would wake up in a women's ward. Now it gives the NHS the possible right to have that not be the case. That's where it is difficult. Well, I think
this is like luxury belief stuff. Like, I'm so put down upon because I'm a male person, but because I identify as a woman, I should be allowed in the women's ward. Like, I don't know, Matt. What do you expect to happen on either ward? Like, what's going to happen if you're in the men's ward in the hospital?
think as well, because of social media.
Like, surely no one wants to be in the hospital in the first place. Like, I just don't get. I don't have much sympathy for that talking point, honestly. Oh no, I might be put in with the men instead of the women. I don't know. Maybe be thankful you live in the UK and that you're not going to be billed fucking £50,000 for your short stay in hospital.
We talk much more about the issues of young children. A lot of our young children are growing up in a very, 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 very confused world. And there has been the issue about giving hormone blockers to younger people. I'm glad that we're addressing those. But if I can just...
Yep, I'm glad that we're stopping that.
...say, my friend Rebecca, who is a trans actress, I did a series with her called Boy Meets Girl years ago.
Yeah.
For those of us who know who we are, Rebecca once said, when I said, what does it feel like to be trans?
Who actually believes that some trans have been discriminated against at work in the last 10 years? I'm willing to bet it happens. The thing is, though, if a workplace is going to discriminate against you, unless they're rather stupid, they're not going to do so, like, openly. They're going to find other ways to, like, discriminate against you that don't actually directly tie to your being trans, you know? I'm sure it happens. Like, it's not good, but I don't know. I don't see what the trans rights side are doing to actually combat that.
And she said from the age of 4, it felt like being in a prison with no release date. And I think that we all...
What?
...who know who we are. Rebecca once said, when I said, what does it feel like to be trans? And she said from the age of 4, it felt like being in a prison with no release date.
Jesus Christ. Oh, that rubs me the wrong way. That really rubs me the wrong way.
And I think that we all love that community. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very hard to understand it unless you break it down to those sort of levels. So I also believe that we do have to understand.
From the age of 4, listen, you have to understand. That's the
You're
narrative.
anti-trans.
Ooh. Thank you, the special hat. Thanks for following. Yeah, that's the narrative. Like, we've all decided that you know what your gender identity is at the age of 3 or whatever. Every single male to female, transsexual, except me, I guess, and maybe a few others. That's what they'll tell you. Oh, I knew I was a girl from the age of like 3 or 4 or 5. When, is it not more true, probably, that they start questioning their gender? They start remembering certain thoughts they had? Do we know for a fact that all kids don't have those kind of feelings occasionally? Are we not, like, selecting certain memories that point us in a certain direction and confirm that the reason our life sucks, because usually people seem to transition when their life is falling apart, is because actually I'm a girl in a boy's body? Like, I don't know.
around and protect the rights of biological women. It's so hard because I've got my toe in so many different ponds. It's really difficult to discuss it because every time you're self-editing and thinking.
I'm so tired. Like, when you're talking about how hard it is to discuss something, do you know what you're not doing? Discussing the thing. How can it be hard? I mean, you're on national TV, I get. You're going to get blowback, whatever the fuck you say on this issue. That doesn't mean that your only recourse is to sit on national TV and say, oh, well, I don't want to say anything because I'll get shit for it. Like, I hate that kind of shit. Like, why even bother talking about this at that point?
Yeah, I know, but we have found ourselves in this situation with so many contentious issues that we get into this binary position. You're either for it or against it. You know, that you're in this camp.
I like this woman. Someone said her name's Kay Adams. I quite like her. I think she's cutting the shit a little bit. And like presenting the other side without just sounding like a rabid transphobe. And to everyone else's credit, they're not like immediately shaming her for, shall we say, playing devil's advocate for the people celebrating the ruling, you know?
Or you're in that camp. This is too complicated for that. And in terms of the toxicity that we've seen over the last 8 years, I think our politicians have let us down.
Yes.
I think they've allowed it to become toxic. And I think we have to take some responsibility not to continue that.
Exactly.
Denise, the trans relative. Yeah, that's often the case when you get these people trying way too hard to go to bat. It's because they know an actual trans person who's told them whatever about their experience. And I don't know, I understand having more sympathy for someone when you actually know the issues, when you actually know someone who's been through it, but you have to be careful not to, like, I don't know if some of these people, because they know someone, they worry about that specific person getting offended or something, I don't know. But like, it's easy for it to create bias the other way, whereas you should be avoiding bias on either side, really. The woman with white hair does not want to talk about this. Well, yeah, she knows she's going to get shit if she makes any solid points. They're all lovies, so scared of losing their fan base. It kind of seems that way. I think, honestly, this lady on the left is at least trying, you know what I mean? At least seems to understand both sides of the issue.
If this does anything, if it's a bit of a reset, surely it's time to stop shouting at each other.
Yeah.
Start listening to each other
to discuss
and trying
this more
to understand the different people's perspectives.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's not the last we've heard, but because now actually that law has to be applied in the real world, and obviously that's going to bring change.
Okay, it stops rather abruptly. There we go. Loose women. You glad? Are you glad that you know what loose women is now? Anyway, hey, if you like the stream, listen, there's 86 people watching. You just, if you just maybe consider, or not consider, and literally do, scroll down, just move the cursor on this button here, like button, just give it a click. You can maybe consider, if you want to take your support a bit further, checking the links in my description. You can super chat via Streamlabs, you can have your message heard, you can help fill up the bar. I might smile 2% more often. It depends on your actions, though. Let's be real. Have your message heard. Have it read out in text-to-speech for the whole stream to hear. You can check me out on Twitch. Stream the same thing to YouTube as I do to Twitch, but I monetize on Twitch and not YouTube. You can join my Patreon for a few bucks a month. Help support the stream. The more lucrative this becomes for me, I guess, the longer I can do it for. You can join my Discord. We talk about trans issues, other issues. I find clips of deer pushing traffic cones around and put them on the chill section. You can buy my music, you can stream my music. I make music. I actually played some before the stream today. I don't always, but I did today. If you like it, you might want to consider buying and or streaming, saving on Spotify, etc., etc.